A setting sun painted the New York City skyline with orange hues as Mike Santos watched the city from atop the building housing Eco-Future, his family's company. At 25, he felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders, not just as the heir to a business empire, but as someone carrying the mission to transform lives. The wind tousled his dark hair as his deep, determined brown eyes contemplated the contrasts of the metropolis, gleaming skyscrapers alongside struggling neighborhoods. "It's okay to be nervous on your first official day as director of social projects," said Anthony, his father, approaching with measured steps. "You've been prepared for this your whole life." Inside, projects that could transform the reality of thousands of people. Ideas born in college that could now come to life. "It's not nervousness, Dad. It's responsibility," he replied, as the aroma of freshly brewed coffee reached the balcony, mingling with the distinctive smell of the big city. "I want to make a real difference, not just plaster my face on sustainability ads." The auditorium was packed, not only because of his fame as a young, innovative entrepreneur, but also because of the revolutionary water filter project he developed for communities without access to basic sanitation. It was at the end of the lecture that he saw her. Standing, with her hand raised among dozens of students, she didn't seem intimidated by the buzz around her. She had curly hair pulled back in a casual ponytail, and green eyes that sparkled with intensity as she precisely questioned the most vulnerable points of his project. "Laura Mendez, senior year environmental engineering," she introduced herself, her firm voice echoing through the auditorium. "Your system is brilliant, but the maintenance cost is still prohibitive for truly underserved communities. I have some ideas to reduce that by up to 40%. Mike approached, intrigued, and soon found himself immersed in a technical discussion that lasted for hours. The campus was almost empty when they finally looked at their watches, surprised at how much time had passed. "We have to continue this conversation," he said, unable to hide his enthusiasm. "Eco-Future could use someone with your vision. I want to make a real difference." Something about the passion with which she defended her ideas, the way her eyes sparkled when she talked about sustainability and social justice, created a connection he had never experienced. He had no idea that that moment would change his life forever. 3 months had passed since that first meeting. What began as a professional partnership, with Laura reluctantly accepting an internship in Eco-Future's social projects division, had transformed into something much deeper. The nights in the office, discussing ideas amidst leftover Chinese food and cold coffee, often ended with laughter and glances that lasted longer than necessary. The passion they both shared for socio-environmental causes created an increasingly strong bond. "She's incredible, Dad," Mike commented during a family lunch. "Laura sees things that no one else notices. Thanks to her, we reduced the costs of the Green Village project by 30%. She grew up in one." For the Santos family, however, she remained part of the inner circle, treated almost like a daughter by Anthony, who always believed that the two would eventually get back together. That same afternoon, the rain fell relentlessly on New York City when Mike found Laura in the company laboratory, bent over plants and calculations. "We need to talk," he said, closing the door. His heart was racing, as if he were about to jump off a cliff. "I can't pretend anymore that what I feel for you is just professional admiration." Together, they developed a revolutionary project for the river communities of the Amazon, a sustainable water purification system that used local materials and could be maintained by the communities themselves. Operation Clean Water soon became the flagship of Eco-Future's social division, and the couple, the most promising duo in the sustainability sector. "You are the future of this company," declared Anthony during the presentation of the project to shareholders under enthusiastic applause. No one noticed when Vanessa left the room discreetly, her face pale with contained anger. No one noticed the long calls she made late at night, nor the secret meetings with Richard, an old friend of Mike's who had always harbored resentment for being passed over for promotions within the company. One sunny afternoon, 6 months after they started dating, Mike took Laura to a small farm upstate. It was where his family used to spend weekends during his childhood, a special place that few knew about. "One day," he said, as they walked among fruit trees, "I want our kids to play here like I used to. I want to build our life together, Laura, a life with purpose." "I never thought I'd find someone who shared not only my love, but also my dreams," she replied, her eyes welling up. Back in the city, news about the couple filled social and business circles. Sustainable Business magazine even published an article calling them the couple that's revolutionizing corporate social impact in America. The future seemed bright, indestructible. But in the shadows, Vanessa watched. She planned, waited for the perfect moment. And when Mike announced that he would take Laura to meet his aunts and uncles in Europe, a gesture that, in the Santos family, signified a serious commitment, she knew it was time to act. "I won't lose him to some nobody who came out of nowhere," she whispered to herself as she ran her fingers over an old photo of Mike and her at graduation. "He belongs to me. He always has." With the help of Richard, she began to plant small seeds of doubt in Mike's mind, seemingly innocent comments about how Laura seemed too close to certain company executives, insinuations about her late meetings in the laboratory, and even sincere concerns about her past. "Do you really know her story before college?" Vanessa asked during a lunch, her voice laden with false concern. "I just find it strange that someone so brilliant has never been on anyone's radar before. And it surprises me that you, who have always valued meritocracy, are questioning someone who earned her place through talent." With the growth of the Clean Water Project, her father, Joe Mendez, a retired bus driver who struggled with heart disease, worsened considerably. The nights she spent at the hospital, holding her father's wrinkled hand as he breathed with difficulty, became increasingly frequent. "It's going to be okay, Dad," she whispered, her eyes burning with exhaustion. "The doctor said that with the new treatment you'll get better." On one of those nights at the hospital, Laura met Matt, a resident doctor who frequently checked on her father's condition outside of his official hours. Gentle and caring, he soon became a key support, helping her navigate the complex healthcare system and occasionally getting free samples of the most expensive medications. "You shouldn't carry this burden alone," Matt said one night, offering her a coffee in the silent hospital corridor. "Have you thought about asking your boyfriend for help? From what you tell me, his family could afford it." Growing up in a struggling neighborhood, being raised only by her father after her mother abandoned them, taught her never to depend on anyone. This fierce independence, which so attracted Mike, now created an invisible barrier between them. Mike, in turn, began to notice changes in Laura's behavior, the constant absences, the deep dark circles under her eyes, the calls she answered in a low voice, moving away from him. He attributed everything to work stress and the pressure of the project, without imagining the real reason. "You seem exhausted," he commented one night when they finally managed to have dinner together after a particularly busy week. The elegant restaurant contrasted with Laura's worn appearance. "Are we pushing you too hard at the company?" Her cell phone vibrated in her purse, probably another message from the hospital. "It's just a phase. Believe me, this hurts me more than it hurts you, but as your friend, I can't hide this anymore." All the small doubts, all the unexplained absences, all the secret calls, everything now seemed to make terrible sense. "Who is he?" he asked with a hoarse voice, his fingers squeezing the photos until his knuckles turned white. "A doctor at St. Jude's Hospital," Vanessa replied, her voice a calculated study of compassion. "Richard knows him. Apparently they've been meeting for months." After years of building emotional barriers, he had finally allowed himself to love someone completely. And now, the betrayal seemed to cut through his chest like a sharp blade. "I didn't want to believe it," Vanessa continued, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "But you deserve to know the truth, Mike. You deserve someone who is loyal." The pain gave way to a calculated coldness, a defense mechanism he had perfected over the years. Without saying a word, he put the photos back in the envelope and placed it in the drawer. Then he picked up the phone. "Laura, can we meet tonight? We need to talk." Her damp hair betrayed the drizzle that was beginning to fall, and her pale face revealed days of intense worry. "Did something happen?" she asked, immediately noticing the stiffness in Mike's posture. He was standing near the window, watching the city with a distant look. A glass of whiskey, something rare for him, rested in his hand. "Depends on what you consider something," he replied without turning around. His voice had a cutting quality that Laura had never heard before. "Depends on whether you consider honesty important in a relationship." Her mind tried to process the best way to explain the situation without mentioning her father's illness, a subject that, out of pride and fear of seeming mercenary, she had always avoided. "Matt is just a friend. He's been helping me with—" "It's not what it looks like." Laura felt tears forming but struggled to contain them. "If you let me explain." How to make Mike understand that her absence did not mean betrayal, but devotion to the only relative she had left. "Mike, for everything we've been through, listen to me," she pleaded, her voice choked. "My father is sick, very sick. Matt is his doctor. These meetings, this money, it's all for my father's treatment. And why haven't you mentioned this before? Why all the secrecy?" He confirmed that you have been seen together frequently, in situations that hardly seem professional. "Your internship is officially over. You will receive appropriate severance, but I don't want to see you again. I'm coming to pick you up for dinner with the investors." Her voice sounded on speakerphone, intentionally loud for Laura to hear. "I'm already on my way." What he didn't know, as Laura left his apartment amidst a storm that was finally breaking, was that his hasty decision would unleash a series of events that neither of them could foresee. That same night, alone in her small apartment on the Lower East Side, Laura received a call from the hospital. Her father had suffered a severe heart attack. When she arrived at the hospital, she found Matt in the hallway, his face grave. "We did everything we could," he said, holding her hands with compassion. "I'm so sorry, Laura." When dawn finally broke on the horizon, she was sitting in the hospital hallway, staring blankly at the white wall in front of her. The world she knew had crumbled in less than 24 hours. The love of her life had abandoned her based on a lie. Her father was gone. Her job, which was also her passion, no longer existed. What Laura didn't know, as she stared into the emptiness of her future, was that another life was growing inside her. A small spark of hope amidst the chaos that her existence had become. 6 months passed like a blur in Laura's life. After her father's death, she sold the small apartment where they lived to pay off the medical debts that had accumulated. With the little money that remained and the severance from Eco Future, coldly deposited into her account without any personal message, she rented a tiny room in a boarding house on the Lower East Side. Her pregnancy, discovered 2 weeks after the separation, was now visibly advancing. At 5 months, the small volume in her belly was impossible to hide. Finding a job became an almost impossible mission. Companies in the environmental sector closed their doors when her name was mentioned. Rumors circulated that she had been fired from Eco Future for unethical behavior. "I understand your situation, but we can't hire someone under these conditions," said the manager of a small consulting firm, looking uncomfortably at her belly. "Come back after, well, you know." Meanwhile, Mike's life continued seemingly perfectly. 6 months after breaking up with Laura, he announced his engagement to Vanessa at a glamorous party. Business in America magazine published an extensive article on the golden couple of sustainable entrepreneurship, ironically a title that once belonged to him and Laura. On the outside, Mike seemed radiant. The Clean Water Project, now led by a team that strictly followed the original plans developed with Laura, although her name had been carefully removed from all documents, was winning international awards. Under his direction, EcoFuture expanded to other countries in Latin America. His public image had never been stronger, but those who truly knew him noticed the subtle changes. The genuine passion that once emanated from him when he talked about social projects gave way to technically perfect but emotionally empty speeches. The sparkle in his eyes had turned into an almost mechanical determination. And on the rare occasions when he drank too much, a melancholic silence took over him. "You seem distant lately," his father commented during a family dinner. "Are you having problems with the Amazon project? The expansion requires a lot of work." Doubt gnawed at him in unexpected moments, in meetings where innovative ideas were discussed and he instinctively looked at the place where she used to sit. On nights when he woke up sweating, remembering the desperate expression on her face when she begged to be heard. Vanessa, on the other hand, was living her moment of glory. As the official fiancée of the heir to EcoFuture and marketing director of the company, her power and influence grew daily. Treated like royalty in business circles, she carefully cultivated the image of a modern, successful, and passionate woman. Photos of the couple flooded social media, always accompanied by inspiring captions about love and success. Only Richard, her reluctant accomplice, knew the truth behind the perfect facade. One night, after too many shots of tequila, he almost confessed to Mike. "Dude, there are things you should know about Laura," he began, his tongue heavy with alcohol. Vanessa, always vigilant, intervened quickly. "Richard is too drunk to continue here," she declared, calling a security guard to escort him out of the party. Later, in a threatening call, she made it clear that if he said anything, his career would be ruined, and not just at EcoFuture, but throughout the market. It was also during this period that Laura found unexpected support. Matt, the doctor who had cared for her father, remained present in her life, offering emotional support and free medical care for her pregnancy. Initially reluctant, Laura eventually accepted his help, especially after losing the health insurance she had when she worked at EcoFuture. A genuine friendship blossomed between them. Matt admired Laura's strength and resilience, while she found in him an anchor in stormy times. When he began to show romantic interest, Laura was honest. "My heart is still broken, Matt," she confessed during a simple dinner in her small apartment, "and I don't know if I'll ever get over what happened." It wasn't the sweeping passion she had felt for Mike. It was something calmer, more mature, built on foundations of respect and companionship. As the 8th month of pregnancy approached, Laura began to feel that perhaps life was offering her a second chance. Matt helped her find a better apartment, insisted that she resume her studies with an online environmental management course, and spoke excitedly about raising her daughter as if she were his own. "It doesn't matter that she doesn't have my blood," he said, caressing Laura's belly. "Family is about love, not about DNA." Tired, with visibility reduced by the storm, he didn't see the truck that swerved into the oncoming lane. The phone call came at 3 in the morning. Laura, now 8 months pregnant, rushed to the hospital only to hear the words that would mark another devastating loss in her life. "We did everything we could," said the on-call doctor, unconsciously using the same words that Matt had said to her about her father. "I'm so sorry." The future, which just days ago seemed to finally be gaining smoother contours, had returned to being a threatening unknown. "How will I go on now?" she whispered to herself, her trembling hands caressing her belly. "How will I take care of you alone?" Not just for herself, but for the little life she carried, the only link she had left with the dreams she once dared to dream. Laura's life had become a routine of survival. After the birth of Sophia, a name chosen in honor of her paternal grandmother she would never meet, she had to return to work even sooner than planned. with the help of Ms. Dida, she managed to bring the baby to some events, keeping her in a small makeshift crib backstage while serving champagne and canapes to the New York elite. Almost 2 years had passed since the separation. Sophia grew up healthy and bright, with the same intense green eyes as her mother and an insatiable curiosity about the world around her. Laura lived exclusively for her daughter, finding in motherhood a strength she didn't know she possessed. Meanwhile, Mike's life took unexpected turns. His marriage to Vanessa, held with all the pomp that money could buy, soon proved to be an empty union. The constant arguments, always muffled before they could reach the ears of the press, mainly centered on disagreements about the future of the company. While Mike wanted to expand the socio-environmental projects, Vanessa pushed for more visibility and less investment in struggling communities. "We need to think strategically," she argued, while examining her perfectly manicured nails. "These projects are great for our image, but we need to focus on profit now." The memories came back in unexpected flashes. The sparkle in Laura's eyes when they discussed a new project, the way she completely surrendered to the causes they defended, the feeling of completeness he never experienced again. Richard, corroded by guilt and alcohol, became increasingly distant. At a company party, visibly altered, he made a comment that echoed in Mike's mind. "Sometimes loyalty costs too much," he muttered, before being quickly pulled away by Vanessa. It was during the preparation for EcoFuture's big annual event that Mike and Laura's paths crossed again. The gala, intended to raise funds for the Clean Water Project, now expanded throughout Latin America, would be held at one of the most luxurious hotels in New York City. The catering company where Laura worked was hired for the service. Laura had considered missing the event when she found out who the clients were. The idea of being in the same environment as Mike and Vanessa made her stomach churn, but Sophia had had a high fever for 2 days, and the medications prescribed by the doctor at the clinic didn't seem to be working. She needed the money to take her daughter to a specialist. "Just a few hours," she said to herself as she adjusted the black and white uniform in front of the mirror. "You can do this." Fate, in its relentless irony, placed her precisely in the section where Mike and Vanessa were sitting, along with international investors. With her heart pounding against her chest, Laura took a deep breath and entered the shimmering hall, carrying a tray of champagne glasses. It was as if time stopped. Mike, in the middle of a sentence about sustainability, suddenly fell silent. His eyes, which wandered distractedly around the hall, fixed on the familiar figure approaching. 2 years had changed Laura. Her face was more mature, her eyes carried a wisdom born of pain, and her body clearly carried a new life. "Champagne?" she offered, her voice controlled in a professional tone, deliberately avoiding looking into his eyes. Mike felt the world spin. Something primal and deep inside him cried out in recognition. It was her. Laura. She was there, in front of him, carrying a tray like a stranger when she should be by his side leading projects. And she was pregnant. A child. Another child. Laura. His voice came out as a hoarse whisper. Vanessa, instantly alert, intervened with a forced smile. "Another glass, darling. We're celebrating the announcement of our new project." Was she happy? And why the hell was she serving drinks instead of creating brilliant projects at some competing company? Laura, in turn, felt a dizzying mix of emotions. Anger, pain, longing, and, surprisingly, pity. Mike looked physically well, impeccable in his expensive suit, but his eyes seemed empty, without the passion that had once animated them. "Excuse me," she murmured, finishing the service at the table and quickly walking away. For an instant, Mike considered getting up and following her, but Vanessa's hand squeezed his arm with surprising force, her nails digging into his skin like small daggers. "Don't even think about it," she whispered with a frozen smile to the guests. "We have important investors here." Something inside him had awakened, a restlessness that he could no longer ignore. When the event finally ended, he decided to act. Ignoring Vanessa's protests, he went to the makeshift kitchen in the hotel. But Laura had already left, taking Sophia, who was being cared for by Miss Cedar, in a small room in the back. "I need to find her," he muttered to himself as he walked to his car. The image of Laura serving drinks, visibly pregnant, at an event where his projects were celebrated, triggered something primal in Mike. For the first time in 2 years, he allowed himself to openly question the version of events he had accepted. Why would Laura, brilliant as she was, be in that situation? The pieces didn't fit. Determined to find answers, Mike hired a private investigator. Not to follow her, he wouldn't repeat that mistake, but to find out what really happened 2 years before. Who was the doctor in the photos? What was really going on in those meetings? The report arrived a week later. Mike locked himself in his office to read it, his heart heavy with a dark premonition. The pages revealed a story that made his blood run cold. Laura had never betrayed him. The doctor, Matt Silver, was indeed a respected cardiologist, specializing in complex cases like Laura's father, who suffered from a rare heart condition. The meetings that seemed compromising in the manipulated photos were actually visits to the hospital. And the money she had received was a personal contribution that Matt had made to Joe's treatment after selling his old car. Even more devastating, Joe had passed away on the same night that Mike broke up with Laura. She had faced her father's death completely alone, with no one to support her, and there was more. Matt, who eventually became Laura's partner, had died in a car accident when she was 8 months pregnant. Laura had given birth alone to a girl named Sophia, who was now almost 2 years old. The story of suffering and resilience that emerged from those cold report pages was heartbreaking. Mike felt nauseous. What had he done? How could he have been so blind, so cruel? The investigator had gone beyond the initial request, also discovering that all the evidence of the alleged betrayal had been carefully fabricated. And the name behind the operation was no surprise: Vanessa, with the reluctant help of Richard. When he finished reading, Mike remained motionless in his chair for long minutes, silent tears running down his face. He had destroyed not only a relationship but entire lives, including his own, based on a lie. At that moment, something transformed definitively inside him. The guilt was overwhelming, but there was something more. A fierce determination to fix, as much as possible, the harm he had caused. "Laura," he whispered to the photo that the investigator had included in the report. Her and a little green-eyed girl in a simple playground in the Lower East Side. "What have I done to you?" Guilt consumed him from within like acid, corroding every certainty, every justification he had built over the last 2 years. Sleepless nights became his routine, as he relived every moment, every cruel word he had directed at Laura on that fateful night. The confrontation with Vanessa was inevitable and explosive. "How could you do this?" he asked, throwing the investigator's report onto the dining table of their luxurious apartment. His voice, usually controlled, trembled with contained fury. "You destroyed her life. You destroyed my life. It was only a matter of time before you realized that. Think about your reputation, the company, what your father will say. What right did he have to reappear in Laura's life after everything he had done? After abandoning her when she needed him most? After she had rebuilt her life, alone, facing losses he could barely imagine? In the days that followed, Mike plunged into a spiral of self-deprecation. He temporarily withdrew from the company, to the dismay of his father, who did not understand his son's sudden disinterest in business. He isolated himself in his apartment, ignoring calls and messages. It was Richard, carrying the weight of his own guilt, who finally sought him out. "I should have told you the truth a long time ago," he admitted, his red eyes betraying sleepless nights. "I tried a few times, but Vanessa, she has ways of making people shut up. You had everything, the company, the talent, her love. It was easier to believe that she wasn't good enough for you than to admit that I would never be half the man you are. Mike looked out the window, watching the city that stretched below. Try to fix what can be fixed, even knowing that some things are broken forever. She's a golden girl who takes care of that child like a lioness. He sat on a bench overlooking the playground, his heart pounding against his chest. He wore simple clothes, jeans and a t-shirt, so different from the expensive suits that had become his second skin. It was around 9 in the morning that he saw them. Laura walked slowly, one hand holding little Sophia, who took wobbly steps characteristic of someone who had learned to walk recently. The other hand rested on her belly, visibly larger than on the night of the event. Her face, despite the evident signs of tiredness, radiated a serenity that Mike had never witnessed. For a moment, he just watched from afar, without the courage to approach. Laura helped Sophia climb the slide, laughing at the girl's exaggerated expressions. There was something so pure, so complete in that scene that Mike questioned whether he had the right to intrude, to bring back painful memories to this woman who, despite everything, had found her own peace. But then, as if sensing his presence, Laura looked up and saw him. The recognition was instant. Something ignited in her green eyes, a mixture of surprise and an emotion that Mike couldn't name. For an endless second, they just looked at each other across the distance that separated them, a distance that went far beyond the physical meters between them. It was the abyss created by hasty decisions, by wounded pride, by broken trust. Mike took a deep breath and took the first step towards her. Whatever the result of this encounter, he knew he needed to face his past to have any hope of a better future. "Laura," he said simply, when he got close enough to be heard. She instinctively pulled Sophia closer, a protective gesture that did not go unnoticed by Mike. "What are you doing here?" Laura asked, her voice controlled, but her eyes revealing the inner storm that his presence unleashed. "I found out the truth," he replied directly, "about everything, your father, the doctor, what Vanessa did. Nothing I say will change what happened or alleviate the pain I caused you. It's a pleasure to meet you. Why are you here after so long? And I want you to know that the truth about what happened will be known to everyone. I've already filed for divorce and I'm prepared to publicly admit my mistake." Mike nodded, accepting her words without protest. "I understand. I only ask that you allow me to prove, with actions and not words, that I am truly sorry. In your time, in your space." As he watched Laura walk away with Sophia, Mike faced the harsh reality. Forgiveness, if it came, would be slow and painful, and the broken trust might never be completely restored. Still, he remained firm in his resolution. He would transform his guilt into action, his regret into service. Even if Laura never looked at him with love again, he would dedicate his life to repairing, as much as possible, the harm he had caused. The following weeks marked the beginning of an uncertain journey for Laura and Mike. After the meeting in the park, he did not try to force his presence, respecting the space she clearly needed. Instead, Mike focused his efforts on concrete actions that could, eventually, rebuild some trust. The divorce from Vanessa was announced publicly, along with a surprisingly honest statement about the reasons: irreconcilable differences based on incompatible moral values. The corporate gossip press speculated wildly, but Mike remained firm in his discretion. He would not expose Laura to further unwanted scrutiny. Vanessa, on the other hand, did not accept the end of the marriage with elegance. Threats, emotional blackmail, and finally a smear campaign against Mike within the company itself were part of her arsenal. When all that failed, she played her last card. "I realize now that some things are more important than business or reputation." Cedar, who, although still distrustful, was beginning to believe in his sincerity. "She's having trouble paying for prenatal care," revealed the woman during one of their conversations. "The health insurance is basic, and with this second, more complicated pregnancy," she even called Mike the first time she had taken the initiative to contact him since the breakup. "I don't need your charity," she said, her voice tight on the phone. "I can take care of myself and my children. This is complicated, but don't consider this forgiveness. Everything's normal." Mike, seeing the difficulties Laura faced in carrying the groceries she had bought after the appointment while also taking care of Sophia, naturally assumed the role of helper. The girl, curious and naturally affectionate, quickly got used to his presence. In the following weeks, a silent pattern was established. Mike appeared discreetly at the appointments, helped with small practical tasks, and slowly became a constant, although peripheral, presence in Laura and Sophia's lives. He never stayed longer than necessary, never presumed intimacy, never pushed for more than what was offered to him. The big test came when Laura fell on the stairs of the building, scaring herself more than hurting herself. Instinctively, she called Mike, who arrived in less than 15 minutes, visibly worried. "I've already called the doctor," he said, helping her settle on the sofa. "He said it's best to go to the hospital to check if everything is okay with the baby." "Everything is fine with the baby," announced the doctor after the tests. "But you need complete rest for at least a week, Ms. Mendez. No work, no lifting weight, including your daughter. Cedar has already agreed to stay with Sophia during the day, and I can alternate with her at night, so you can really rest." And for the first time, she allowed Mike to support her as she cried. During the week of forced rest, a new dynamic was established. Mike organized his schedule to be present whenever possible, taking Sophia to daycare, preparing meals, making sure Laura took the prescribed medications. Even when he had to leave for important meetings, he made sure that nothing was missing. Without fanfare, without demanding recognition, he was simply there, constant and reliable. Gradually, the conversations between them deepened. On a particularly quiet night, with Sophia already asleep, Mike finally mustered the courage to ask about the period that followed the separation. "What was it like after you found out you were pregnant?" "I lost my father, I lost you, I lost my job, all in a matter of days. When I found out I was expecting Sophia, I thought it was some kind of cruel joke from the universe. And I learned to be stronger than I ever imagined was possible." Worry about finances returned to haunt her, despite Mike's help, which she still hesitated to fully accept. "I can't just live at your expense," she argued during a medical appointment. "It's already difficult enough to accept your help with Sophia. The Clean Water Project is being expanded, and no one understands the social part better than you." Working from home, connected virtually with the team, she quickly demonstrated why she had been a key piece in the original development of the project. Her fresh ideas, her deep understanding of the real needs of the communities soon made her indispensable again. For Mike, seeing her in her element, brilliant, passionate, creative, rekindled memories of why he had fallen in love with her initially. But now there was a new respect, an even deeper admiration for the woman she had become, despite all the adversities. "You continue to be the most brilliant person I've ever met," he commented after a particularly successful video conference with international investors. Laura blushed slightly, still uncomfortable with compliments, especially coming from him. "I'm just doing my job. It's always been your calling." Sophia, now more attached to Mike than Laura liked to admit, ran to the door when she heard the doorbell, hoping to find him. Instead, she came face to face with Vanessa. "Hello, little one," said the woman, her smile not reaching her eyes. "Is your mother home?" "What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice firm despite her racing heart. Vanessa entered uninvited, looking around with barely disguised disdain. "I came to see for myself what attracted Mike back. It must be something really special for him to abandon everything we built. He'll come back to me eventually. He always does. This," she gestured vaguely at Laura and the apartment, "is just guilt, nothing more." "You lost, Vanessa, not because of me, but because of your own actions. Every word you've said has been recorded, Vanessa. Mike continued, including your implicit confession that you fabricated the whole story of the betrayal. If you try to interfere in Laura's life again, this goes straight to the lawyers and the press. Mike sent the mean lady away. Richard heard her planning something in the office, explained Mike. I'm sorry I didn't get here before she came in. He had changed, matured, learned from his mistakes in the most painful way possible. That night, after Sophia fell asleep, they sat on the small balcony of the apartment, watching the city lights. The invisible barrier that Laura had kept between them seemed more fragile than ever. I never properly thanked you, she said finally, breaking the comfortable silence, for everything you've been doing for us. I'm not doing this to receive gratitude, Laura. Now I'm here because I can't imagine being anywhere else. Because seeing you with Sophia, seeing how you've faced every obstacle with dignity and strength, has only made me fall even more in love. Not with the Laura of 2 years ago, but with the incredible woman you've become. Afraid to trust, afraid to believe, afraid to lose everything again. They both smiled, and Mike looked at her belly, asking for silent permission before touching it. When he felt the movement under his hand, something deep and primal awakened inside him. A protective instinct, a commitment that went beyond reparation or guilt. I want to be part of their lives, he said, his voice choked with emotion, of Sophia's, of this baby. Not to replace their fathers, but to love them as if they were my own. For a long moment, they remained like that, connected by something greater than words. Then she leaned in slightly, and for the first time in over 2 years, her lips touched his, a soft, hesitant kiss, but full of promise. Let's try, she whispered against his lips, one day at a time. In the garden of the Santos family's old country house, now transformed into the headquarters of the newly created Living Waters Foundation, a small group gathered for an intimate ceremony. The late afternoon sun filtered through the ancient trees, creating a kaleidoscope of golden light on the manicured lawn. Sophia, now almost 3 years old, ran excitedly with a small basket of flowers, scattering petals wherever she went. Her light yellow dress danced in the wind as she laughed, the personification of childhood joy. Not far away, in Miss Cedar's arms, little Matt, just 6 months old, watched his sister with big, curious eyes. His name, a tribute to the man who had been a crucial support for Laura in her darkest moments, carried not only memory, but gratitude. Laura remained at the back of the property, breathing deeply to calm her racing heart. The simple white silk dress delicately embraced her curves, simple and elegant like herself. In her hands, a small bouquet of wildflowers that grew on the banks of the nearby river, symbolizing the beauty that can bloom even in the most unlikely places. Nervous? Asked Anthony Santos, approaching with a gentle smile. Laura smiled in response. Her relationship with Mike's father, initially tense and uncomfortable, had evolved into a deep, mutual respect. Anthony had become not only a staunch supporter of the foundation, but also a devoted grandfather to Sophia and Matt. A little, she admitted. It seemed so surreal after everything. Ahead, under an arch of wildflowers, Mike waited, his eyes fixed on her as if contemplating a miracle. The path to get there had not been easy. There were days of doubt, nights of difficult conversations, moments when old wounds seemed impossible to heal completely. There was the challenge of integrating 2 lives that had followed separate paths for so long, of finding a balance between independence and partnership. Laura's pregnancy, the first months of Matt's life, Sophia's adaptation to a new family reality, each step required patience, understanding, and above all, honest communication. Mike learned to respect Laura's boundaries, not to presume or impose, to earn trust daily through consistent actions. Laura, in turn, learned to lower her defenses, to risk again, to believe that happiness was not just a trap waiting to close on her. The ceremony was brief and deeply personal. They exchanged vows written by themselves, promises that recognize both the painful past and the future they chose to build together. "I promise to never again take our truths for granted," said Mike, his voice firm despite the evident emotion. "I promise to listen not only to your words, but to your silence. I promise to be a partner, a friend, and a safe harbor. I promise to love Sophia and Matt as my own children, honoring their stories and their origins. And I promise, above all, to never forget that this love is not something that was given to us, but something we built from the ashes with work, forgiveness, and conscious choice every day. I promise to allow you to be a father to our children without fear or reservations, and I promise to believe every day that some stories really need to shatter to be reborn stronger." The kiss that sealed the ceremony carried the sweet taste of victory over pride, prejudice, and the circumstances that almost destroyed them. The small reception that followed was as intimate as the ceremony. Close friends, some colleagues from the foundation, the original team of the Clean Water Project, people who had witnessed different chapters of their journey. Richard was there, sober for 8 months, now working in the community department of the foundation, his own journey of redemption. Ms. Kaida, proud as a surrogate grandmother, rocked Matt while animatedly narrating stories from the time when Laura worked as a waitress. In a quiet moment, while the guests chatted and Sophia showed her drawings to everyone who wanted to see, Mike and Laura briefly escaped to the bank of the small river that cut through the property. "Remember the first time I brought you here?" he asked, embracing her from behind as they watched the tranquil flow of the water. Laura smiled, leaning back against his chest. "You said you wanted our children to play here, like you used to. They just took a different form." Back at the party, they found Sophia trying to teach Anthony her first dance steps, who played the role of doting grandfather with natural ease. Matt had fallen asleep in Richard's arms, who seemed simultaneously terrified and amazed by the trust placed in him. The night fell softly on the property. Delicate lights hung from the trees, creating an almost magical setting. When the music started again, Mike extended his hand to Laura. "Mrs. Santos," he said with a smile, "would you give this dance to this humbly grateful man for a second chance?" From the classrooms of the university to the heart of a revolutionary project, from the devastating pain of betrayal to the slow and patient reconstruction of trust, from absolute loneliness to the meeting of a family built not by blood or conventions, but by choice and conscious love. "What are you thinking about?" asked Mike, noticing her distant look. "About how unpredictable life is," she replied, her gaze meeting Sophia's, who was now dancing with Richard, stepping on his feet while he feigned exaggerated pain to make her laugh. "About how the worst moments sometimes lead us to the best places. You know what impresses me the most?" he asked, turning his attention back to the woman in his arms. "How you never became bitter, even though you had every reason to be. But I realized that bitterness is a luxury we can't afford when there are other lives depending on us." Laura raised her face to look at him, finding in his eyes the same fire, the same passion that had attracted her years before, now tempered by hard-won wisdom. "Me too," she replied. "Together. It is the ability to look at the scars and see not only pain, but also healing. It is the courage to break completely and, from the pieces, build something even more beautiful. And the stories that survive this process are forever. If this story touched you, subscribe for more heartwarming narratives like this. What would you do in the protagonist's place? Would you be able to forgive a betrayal of this magnitude? Comment below.